2024 was the year of Shadow for many different reasons. However, the one that stands out the most, besides from the third Sonic movie, has to be Sonic X Shadow Generations. From this point on, I'll be referring to it as Shadow Generations because it's quicker. Now, Shadow Generations is arguably the best Sonic game we've ever gotten, full stop. Now, the reason I say this is because everything is just like, they got everything right. They have Shadow perfectly in character, the stages they brought back, even the one from Frontiers, and I don't know if I said this right, the bosses. All of the bosses that we fight are just perfect bosses for Shadow himself to fight. Like, ever since Sonic Heroes, when Metal Overlord first appeared, I always wanted to see like I know we kind of got this in the comics, but I wanted to see Metal Overlord or Neo Metal Sonic versus Shadow, and I was so disappointed when I first heard about Heroes that we didn't get that. We got a little of it in the IDW comics, I think. Actually, no, we did during the arc before the Zombots, which I'll talk about in a later video. But yeah, we got a little taste of it in the comics, but I always wanted to see it actually in game. And now that we have, it was just so good. And I know canonically the Sonic characters get stronger, or at least I know that Sonic and Shadow get stronger as time goes on. So it's so cool to see how far the characters have progressed. Because if Shadow can now take on like what's this called? Neo Metal Sonic and his ultimate form, Metal Overlord. If he can take on Metal Overlord in his base form, you can only imagine that Sonic could do the same thing, which really shows how the characters have progressed in terms of their own abilities. Before they needed Super Sonic, Tails, and I don't want to say Super Sonic, Super Knuckles, and Super Tails. They needed all of them just to beat Metal Overlord, and now Shadow can do that in his base form. And we already seen in Frontiers how powerful Sonic's gotten with all his new abilities. Next boss I want to talk about, Mephiles. Now, I think they could have done a little bit better for Mephiles' voice, because at first I wasn't a huge fan of it, but it definitely has grown on me since I first heard it. Bringing Mephiles back is such a huge W, and I do love the attention to detail that Shadow doesn't remember him, because not only did time travel nonsense happen, but Mephiles was completely erased from their universe, meaning they have no memory of him. And I love how they didn't bring Shadow's memories back because he was in the void or anything like that. No, they kept it canon that he didn't remember them, which was just a great choice. And then there's what's it called? The biohazard. The biohazard, I love Shadow makes a comment towards it that I found really interesting. He calls it a miserable creature and offers to end its suffering, which does sound morbid, but think about it. This is Shadow's predecessor, and there's no way it's not in pain, because it's been experimented on so much, it's definitely in pain. And Shadow acknowledges that fact and decides to put it out of its misery, which is definitely needed to happen. But and again, it's just so good. And for the stages, the first one I need to talk about, I don't remember what it was called, but it's the one that came from Sonic Forces. Now, I've always been an advocate, not an advocate for Forces. Forces was a horrible game, but it had so much potential that was just wasted. And in this game, you can see some of that potential shine through. If the level from Forces we got in Shadow Generations, had we gotten that level of care and polish in actual Sonic Forces had potential. With the idea of the Sonic characters Eggman winning and them having to go to war, a resistance just like the Freedom Fighters back in Sonic the Comics, the earlier Sonic media, an idea like that, being brought into Sonic Forces, that could have been the best Sonic game of all time, and they screwed it up so badly. But that's a video for another day. Actually, a little bit more on that topic. I do like how currently in the IDW, are IDW comics still going? I don't know, but in IDW comics, the Resistance and Restoration HQ kind of takes the place of the Freedom Fighters, which I really like, because I'm a little bit of a fan of the older Sonic media, so seeing some of the old ideas being brought into modern era or whatever era this is, seeing those brought in is just really cool. Another zone I just love, Space Colony Arc. Now, Space Colony Arc is it's the perfect way to start off your game, because I walked into this, when I first played this, I played it on day one. When I came in, I was expecting a good game, and Space Colony Arcs just set that up so well. The small mini cutscene with Doom's eye, it was just so good. Like the way he's just falling through the buildings that are just like being distorted. That was, it's just so good. Like I don't even know what words to use. It's just great. And by far my favorite zone after that would have to be Rail Canyon. Rail Canyon just looked so good, and I loved the train mechanics, which might have been the original. I don't remember, but like it was just so good. And like seeing all these like old shadows, like I don't want to say shadow exclusive stages. Seeing all these things like brought into the limelight is just so good. And the last stage I really want to talk about is Radical Highway. Now I saw a few people like joking about how it like kept coming back. Personally, I didn't really see a problem with it because like it was fun to play. Like seeing it come back a few times might have been disappointed for other people, but I didn't really care because like if the gameplay's fun, I could disregard that one small detail. Like the gameplay was fun and good. It was challenging at sometimes, which was also good because like it's a fun challenge. Yeah, so overall, with Radical Highway coming back a few times, actually I would say improved the game a little bit because like it's Shadow's most traumatizing time for when he just woke up from cryostasis. He's like finally processing the death of his family, and like he swears revenge. This is his darkest hour, and this is like the place he had his darkest hour. So it makes sense that Black Tomb would keep bringing him here to torment him. So overall, Radical Highway coming back a few times, I didn't mind. It was fine for me. Now most of the Doom powers were pretty good. Like the wings were definitely my favorite because it like replaces a Super Shadow, since Shadow can have all 7 Chaos Emeralds. Overall, I like the wings show potential because like imagine being able to fly in a normal Sonic stage. Like I would love to be able to do that as like Super Sonic in the next Sonic game. Like just being able to fly in base stages. Like I would kill for that opportunity. It's just so cool. But and like the other Doom powers are pretty good. Doom Spears is pretty much just a Chaos Spear, so I didn't like accept multiple, so I didn't really have any strong opinions on that. But overall, the worst Doom power I had to say by far was definitely the Squid. Not because it was bad. The Squid definitely had potential, but like we didn't really learn how to use it like good enough. Like had they given us like more tutorial and time to like learn with it and use it, it would have definitely been better. Like if better explains, I would have definitely like the Squid would be higher on my list. But since it wasn't, I just can't. It's acceptable, but it's definitely the low point of the Doom powers. Now, leaning more towards the Sonic, like the old Sonic generations, I do like all the new details added. Like the mention of the time stones had me out of my chair when I first heard it. Like I love I know how people are like unfairly complaining about Ian Flynn, but look, like he's making it make sense. Like he's finally, after so many years, like he did this in Frontiers and IDW2. We're finally piecing back the lore of Sonic the Hedgehog in a way that makes sense and is coherent with the past, even though the past has been weird. And it's making sense and it's telling good stories. And I just, as a Sonic fan, like okay, I was a young Sonic fan during like after Frontiers is really or not Frontiers Force's release. Let me tell you, that was not a fun time to be a Sonic fan because like if you ever even mentioned being a Sonic fan, someone like in the next room would be like, "Hey, what about Sonic Forces? That was like a horrible game." And then you'd never win an argument. But after Frontiers, after the movie, and especially after this game, there's like a genuine argument for like Sonic, like the Sonic franchise being a good franchise. Like the movies, especially like those are even easier to argue for being a Sonic fan towards. Now, one like kind of major piece of criticism I have for the game is that like it's kind of weird. Like playing Sonic Generations and Shadow Generations like next to each other, it could be like Shadow Generations is a good game. Actually, it's a great game. It's nearly perfect. But like the fact that you're putting that next to the old Sonic Generations, even with the little new things they added, Sonic Generations is always gonna feel like the weaker half because like it's like they did like change up the voices and the voice lines to make more sense with the character directions they're going in. And yes, I am happy about that. But the thing is, like, no matter how much differences they change, it's still like base Sonic Generations. And putting that next to Shadow Generations, like Sonic Generations came out in what, like 2000? I don't remember the exact year. 2000, somewhere around 2009 or earlier. I want to say. I don't know. I don't remember the exact year. But like putting that like older game next to like new Shadow Generations with like all of the new stuff they added and all like the cutscenes and like shiny like new details, putting those games next to each other Sonic Generations is always going to feel like the weaker half, especially with like the free roam area in Shadow Generations next to like the narrow line one in Sonic Generations. Like it's all Sonic Generations is always going to feel like the weaker half of a playthrough. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't me saying that Sonic Generations is a bad game. I will always argue against that because like Sonic Generations was the first Sonic game I actually owned, and as like an introduction to the franchise, it's the like one of the best games you can play. Sonic Generations will always be a good game. There's no taking that away. I'm just saying, putting a good game next to like a peak, like nearly perfect game, even if it's a good, though it's a good game, Sonic Generations is always going to look like the weaker half. But like having like a weaker half that's still like pretty like really good, like that's still a good like accomplishment. Like I'm glad they're packaged together, but Sonic Generations is gonna look weaker, even though it's like it was really good in the time and it's still really good now. Another little criticism I have now, this is a bit of a nitpick, but going from like modern Sonic like double pressing jump to do like a what's called a homing attack, modern Sonic's homing attack, and then going to Shadow's Chaos Snap attack, which is pretty much just a homing attack with extra steps. Going from the change controls is like a little like off-putting, and it definitely like in earlier playthroughs it definitely resulted in a death, but it's not that big of a criticism. It doesn't really take away from the actual game because as you play the game you'll get used to it and like get used to the different controls. So yeah, it's not the biggest deal, but it's definitely like a minor nitpick I first had when I like picked up the game for the first few times. Though now I'm pretty much used to it and it doesn't bother me at all anymore. So like yeah, it's not the biggest deal, but it's still something. So yeah, those are most of my opinions about Sonic X Shadow Generations or just Shadow Generations. If you enjoyed or agreed, please subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Like the video if you liked it, and comment below your own opinions. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.